Okay, so this is the beginning of my testimony. I'm going to cover the very early years and how I fell into bondage and how bad it got. Now, I had always believed in Jesus. I was raised in a family that was very God-fearing. My grandfather and my grandmother were both ministers. Technically, my mom and my two uncles, her brothers, were raised in church. I wasn't exactly raised in church, although I did spend a lot of time in church. I was more into my toys. I was introduced to video games, which became a very, very, very large, intricate part to my life, pretty much my entire life. And that's also a major part of my testimony. I ended up in bondage to pornography, but I found out later on that video games was actually the bigger stronghold in my life. It was actually the first one to enter in. And I picked up a lot of different spirits with that. Now, at a very, very, very young age, I must have been maybe 3, 4, maybe 5. I had an experience where I believe, I don't really remember. I really don't. I just remember an experience, and I know that there was a time where I did pick up a spirit of lust. I don't know if it was generational or if it was because of an experience that happened to me and I literally picked up a demon. But there was a demon of lust with me at a very, very young age, and I didn't even understand. I remember there's behavioral patterns that used to enter into my mind, and I didn't understand or even know what things meant that was happening, but these thoughts would enter into my mind. So I grew up with this spirit, and I'm gonna let you guys know I'm gonna just be sharing this testimony from the perspective of now, not from the perspective of at the time, because there's things I know about it now that I'm just gonna share from the get-go. Jesus showed me that this spirit was literally a demon that had an agenda for my life, and it specifically did set things up to set me up to be in bondage. It had a plan to transform me, shape me, and mold me into what it wanted me to be. And as I go through this testimony, I'll explain what I mean by this as I come to certain milestones. Before I get to the first milestone, I'm going to mention how I had the seed of Christ planted in me. Because as I said, I had always believed in Jesus, but I didn't really know much about Jesus. I used to play with my toys in church, and I really didn't pay attention to sermons, and I was just about, the idols that children are given, and that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to play and have fun. Now my uncle, the oldest one, he became a Jehovah's Witness, and he repented of the worldly lifestyle, because my two uncles and my mom were pretty worldly. They didn't actually, even though they were raised in church, they didn't actually have the truth of Christ planted in them, so that they lived in sin. My uncle, he repented. He got married to my aunt, and I used to go visit him. He decided to move to Detroit. I used to go visit him, and it was when I was visiting them that when I went to Kingdom Hall, which I had a choice. They asked me if I wanted to go. If I didn't want to go, I'd be at home alone, and I didn't want to be at home alone. So I went with them, and they told me I wasn't allowed to bring my toys. So I went there, and I was kind of forced to kind of pay attention. And it was cool because even though with Kingdom Hall it's pretty much just like church, I really enjoyed the Bible studies and their field service, because with the Bible studies, I was actually allowed to participate. I was allowed to actually ask questions, and if I knew an answer, just reading through stuff, I was allowed to give an answer, and I really enjoyed the interactivity, and I learned a lot through that. Field service, running around, knocking on doors, and handing out Watchtower magazines and their Awake magazines, I really enjoyed that as a child. Jesus planted a very serious seed of evangelism in me through these experiences. During this time, however, Jesus did shield me from Jehovah's Witness doctrines. I remember my uncle telling me that I could read whichever Bible translation I want to. I don't have to use the Jehovah's Witness version of the translation of their scriptures. And I remember going through John chapter 1 and comparing John chapter 1 verse 1, the Jehovah's Witness translation with, I think it may have been the King James or something, and I was wondering, okay, well, which one's the right one? And I asked within myself, and Jesus answered me. I literally heard within myself that the King James translation, that specific translation I was looking at, was the correct one, and that it was not supposed to be translated that the word was a God. There's a few things that Jesus had shown me. That actual same experience, the question was put inside of me, why do people call the Bible the Word when the Bible calls Jesus the Word? So these were little questions that came up in my mind as a young child, and Jesus was teaching me, and I didn't really realize. It's weird, like it's like I didn't realize it was Jesus, but yet I was able to tell what the truth was when it came. It came with understanding. And even the questions that were put into my mind, they were like rhetorical questions that had a wisdom packed behind it. These were some of the experiences I started experiencing when I actually started giving attention to who Jesus was. And at this point, I had believed that Jesus was the Son of God. I knew that God, he should be worshipped, and he was greater than my mom and everyone that I knew. As for believing that Jesus is the Archangel Michael, I thank Jesus I did not have to experience that at such a young age. I didn't have to see or hear any of that. It could have messed me up, maybe. I don't know. Maybe Jesus would have fixed that as well. Maybe he would have just told me that's not the case. But I never believed that Jesus was the Archangel Michael. And I didn't really believe any of the major Jehovah's Witness doctrines either. Like, he just shielded me from it. I still believed that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and somehow he was God, even though I didn't understand it. I, around this time, acknowledged God as my Father. It actually got to a point where I remember driving in the car with my mom and my stepdad. They were dating at the time. I think I was maybe about, I don't know, I could have been like 7 or 8 or something. And I basically confessed that I loved God more than I loved my mom, and loved both of them. And my stepdad got offended for my mom's sake, saying I shouldn't put anyone before my mom. And you know what? I love the man. I know what he meant. Like, I get it. It's just like he didn't see or understand what I knew. My mom was silent. She didn't actually react whatsoever, and that was a highlight in my mind. I'll never forget that. And I wasn't in trouble or anything, but it was just weird. It's just I realized I just had the revelation that God was greater than all, and he made my mom, and if he made my mom, then he must be greater than my mom, even though I came from my mom, you know? So it was really cool because I definitely was developing a relationship with the Father. I was developing a relationship with Jesus. However, once I hit grade 4, that's when they started teaching sex education. And I remember when, they sent the paper home, and, parents had to give consent back then, or if they wanted you to opt out or whatever. And my family was cool with school teaching me. I mean, that way they don't have to have the awkward conversation. But sadly, on a few accounts, one, that the fact that this happened, period, and two, this happened before I was even taught anything. I didn't know anything yet. I didn't get a chance to sit down in school and have school teach me, which, to be very candid and just be transparent here, I would have preferred school being the first route of learning about this than what had happened to me. This demon led someone in my family who had been watching pornography to forget the video in the VCR. And this is the first time this ever happened. And people were watching porn for I don't know how long. I didn't even know this stuff existed, okay? It's just such a coincidence, and I don't believe in coincidences, that this tape cassette was left in the VCR just before, if it wasn't a day, it was days, like within the week. Wait, no, it was the day before. Yes, it was the day before. The day before I was about to learn about how reproduction works, this tape cassette was left inside the VCR, and I found it, and I will never forget the what I saw. Like it's still in my mind. I remember the scene. I remember what I saw because I had never seen that before in my life. I'll tell you right now, it's not what God had Adam and Eve do. I was seeing stuff that was ungodly. And then I saw things that I didn't know the human body, especially the male body, did. I had no idea. I hadn't learned anything yet. So I was completely shocked, intrigued, interested, and really trying to figure out what was going on. I then ended up rewinding and watching the whole scene, and then I rewound a little bit further and watched a scene before that. So I had taken in a lot of information, and I ended up taking in demons. And I left the video back on where it was, and I just left it there. And the next day I went to school, and my friend was all excited because his mom told him what happened. He was telling me, and all I had as a reference was pornography. Like, I was taught about sex education by a demon using pornography at age 9 in grade 4. The day before, I was supposed to be taught through the education system, which had a much more tasteful manner in explaining it. They had a little cartoon video that explained the body parts and the reproductive organs. They did technically have a porneia, sadly. I don't agree with any of this now. Like, I don't agree with even the school system going through it that way. But I'm saying it's better than what had happened to me the day before. And I just want to let people know that if you are sinning, if you're practicing sin in your house, or you have your kids go to family members who are practicing sin, demons will lead your children to find it, and you will not know, because that's what happened to me. After this happened to me, this demon started showing me pornography in other people's houses, not just family members' houses, but even friends' houses and stuff. All of a sudden, I was finding it, and the demon was supplying it. And I didn't know anything about releasing. So I would watch this stuff, and it would just build up and build up and build up and build up and build up. I didn't know anything about masturbation. I didn't know it existed. I technically was watching this stuff in fear of getting caught because I knew it was wrong, but I was addicted. I remember going to another family member's house, and I found in the basement a whole heap of pornography that had to have been there for years because it belonged to someone who had not been there for years, but it was my first time finding it since I had found out what pornography was. And I watched all those, I watched all of it. I was instantly addicted, bound, and I could not stop. I remember stopping and turning it off, leaving, and then the thoughts kept going to go back and watch it. It felt good, even though I wasn't even doing it. All I was doing was watching it. And this was terrible because I just ended up spending hours watching it and watching it and watching it. Now, keep in mind, people are probably wondering, well, what happened to your parents? Why didn't people check on you? I was a very, very, very good child, so no one really needed to babysit me. I didn't really get into mischief. So it caused really good ground for this demon to shred my life to pieces in the shadows. My mom did a really great job in instilling great values into me. I never really got involved in drugs. She really taught me about that. She even taught me about fornication and not having sex before marriage. I just didn't know anything about pornography. I knew nothing about it. And this demon really did a good job in, quote, protecting me, end quote, from being found out. And I just had years of pumping this stuff into me. It wasn't until about 2 years later, maybe 3 years. It must have been the next year. The next year, I think I found out about masturbation. I then had friends talking about it and friends talking about this kind of stuff. I think the following year, that's when I got bound to masturbation. I think I remember when I first did it, I wasn't even watching pornography. I was already sexualized that if I was watching TV shows and stuff, my brain was already fried. And I ended up doing the act. I wasn't really addicted to that right away, and I didn't always have access to pornography. It took about 2-3 years before it really became a bondage thing. And then it made it worse when I had friends who were also doing the same thing. By the time I got to high school, I then got exposed to internet pornography, which is a next level. At least back then it was another level. And I forgot to mention that while in elementary school, on top of finding this stuff, I then started finding the channels on TV. I'd go to friends' houses to sleep over, and we'd both just sit there watching the scrambled stuff. I don't think they have that nowadays, but back then that's what they had, where you could still watch certain channels scrambled, and you can hear everything, and you can kind of make out stuff, and I used to watch that too. And then in high school, I found out about the internet stuff, and ironically, it wasn't even like I was getting this stuff off the internet. I would get stuff from my friend who had gotten stuff off the internet, and then I was keeping it on my computer. I still looked up stuff online as well, but it was stuff that was downloaded that really that's basically what I started getting bound to. And that's around the time my mom found out, and she was not happy at all. Like, she was very disturbed by this. My stepdad, he spoke to me about it, and by this time they were married. My stepdad, he found out as well, obviously, and he told me that I needed to be careful because this stuff can take over people's lives. And he was speaking with experience in his voice, and I was thankful for the advice, but it didn't really help me because I was already chained up to this demon. And my grandmother, much later on, she found out pretty much closer to college days, and she's the one who actually rebuked me and did say that there's evil is of Satan and it's not of God, and she corrected me. But by then it was way too late. It was way too late. Like, that was not going to help me at all. And I just continued. I was a slave to this thing. I thought I liked it. I got to a point where I said I was never going to stop. I had friends saying the same thing. I had friends that had eventually got married, and they were continuing watching pornography. That's way more into the future. But the point is, I was really, really, really saturated in this stuff. I would say that it was not even to the level of what normal people experience with pornography. I was watching it like it was Saturday morning cartoons. I was masturbating 2-3 times a day sometimes. It was literally a habit of mine, like how people smoke weed or people drink. I literally I watched pornography and I masturbated. And it was weird because once I started hitting the college days, I used to go to house parties and they'd just be playing porn. Or I'd lock up in a room because people had like just computers set up, and that was the culture. It was very disgusting and really weird. Like, I just knew people that this is what they did and had access to it, and there was different grades and different quality, and it was really bad. I didn't understand any of this at the time, and I'll tell you right now that there was a spiritual agenda with this. The reason there's stuff going on in this world right now, and the reason why it's happening is because of things like this. But I became a literal slave to this spirit of pornography. Literally, I even in college, I had been supplying people with pornography. I did this once. This wasn't a common practice. It's just something I had done. It was almost like I was dealing drugs. It was dumb. I think I did it for free though. I don't remember if I got paid or not. Dude may have paid me. I don't even remember. He may have paid. If he paid me, it was probably like $10 or something like that. I don't know. But this is what I was going through, and this is what I was living. And even saying this now, it actually feels disgusting having to go through all this. Some of the stuff is really just coming back in my mind, and I'm still shocked even to this day with how low and how degraded my life became because someone forgot a video cassette in a VCR. And even before then, a spirit, a demon, decided it wanted me as this slave. So those were the earlier days. That was the time of how I got bound and generally how bad it got. I'm going to end this particular portion of the testimony here, and in the next video, I'm going to go through how I went through the darkest years of my life. It was about 3 years, but specifically the last year I'm going to go through, and what started happening to me, which started scaring me when it came to pornography.